Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Fiduciary Wealth webinar. Today, I'm going to be talking about moving from the UK to Gibraltar and the key things you need to consider. So I think who is today's webinar aimed at? I think it's pretty simple. So it's for those of you who are considering moving to Gibraltar. Maybe you're in the early stages or latter stages of finalizing your move. And some of the content may be appropriate for those who've already moved to Gibraltar and you're in the early stages. So there'll be plenty of details coming up. We'll try and keep it as brief as possible. What I will say is like most webinars should be, it is not a comprehensive every step. Today is to give you a guide. These are the things that you should consider. And if you're serious about moving to Gibraltar, you can reach out to us, give us a call or an email, and we can discuss that and help you on your journey to becoming a Gibraltar resident. Quick introduction. My name is Matt Penfold, advisor and director here at Fiduciary Wealth Management. We're based here in Gibraltar, where we deal with those relocating or give advice to those already on ground. Financial planning, wealth management, tax-led investment advice. We also cover the UK and Europe, mainly Spain and Portugal. So if you're considering your different options, want to compare the differences between those jurisdictions, who know others who are interested in those areas, feel free to reach out or pass on our contact details to your friends. So today we're talking about relocating from the UK to Gibraltar and what should you consider. So first, as part of the relocation, and there is a bit of a misconception that Gibraltar is an overseas territory, UK overseas territory, and a lot of people think therefore there is an automatic right for UK nationals to gain residency in Gibraltar. That's not the case. We can travel freely to Gibraltar and live there, but to gain residency, you need to apply for residency, and there's kind of strict criteria on who can and can't obtain residency, which I will cover now. So firstly, there's a few different residency schemes you can come across on. One is Category 2. Category 2 is for high net worth individuals. So if you have substantial net wealth, you have a large kind of annual tax bill, which can be restricted, then Cat 2 might be the best option for you. We do have separate webinars which will go into more detail on these particular residency schemes, or if you want to know more about Cat 2, reach out. Another residency scheme is HEPS, which is for high earning professionals in Gibraltar. So if you earn over a certain amount, that your tax bill can be limited for that as well. Again, there's certain kind of conditions apply. Now, the final residency scheme, which will apply to most people, is self-sufficiency. So this is for you to demonstrate that you can live in Gibraltar, you won't be reliant on the state, you can sustain yourself. Now, there have been restrictions placed for those who can apply for self-sufficiency, which has been kind of post-Brexit, post-COVID. So if you have employment in Gibraltar, then you can apply for residency under self-sufficiency. So depending on what income you're making, you will want to apply for self-sufficiency on an employed basis or the HEP scheme. Again, we can guide you through the most suitable. Now, for those who are self-employed as well, you can apply for residency on the self-sufficiency grounds. But there's a lot of kind of caveats for that. It's not as simple as kind of rocking up and saying, okay, I'm self-employed, I'm working remotely, I can do this. There's been a big kind of push in Gibraltar to restrict those people working remotely from gaining residency here. In fact, one point with Gibraltar is you can't work from home. The leasehold do not allow it. It's not allowed to work from home. So if you're self-employed, you will need office space at a minimum. And you need to consider, will they accept your application. Again, we can talk you through that. We've got experience on that. We know the applications for residency on a self-employed are tightening, and it's a lot harder to go through. If you're just simply kind of working remotely from another country, you're not self-employed, it is very unlikely you will gain residency. If you're not working at all, then again, these changes that have come in mean that you're unlikely to be able to gain residency, with one caveat. If you are of UK state pension age, so you're already in receipt of your UK state pension, then as long as you transfer your UK state pension and your NHS rights to Gibraltar, then you have the automatic right to residency. So that's a kind of caveat. So if you're receiving your UK state pension, the door is very much open for you. If maybe you're in your 50s, but you've retired early, it makes it very difficult to gain residency here in Gibraltar. So that's how you gain residency. So that's one important point to consider. The next is, where are you planning to spend your time? Which may seem like a strange question, but it's very important. Because you need to be mindful of, you need to spend a minimum amount of days in Gibraltar to retain your residency. You also need to be mindful of where you're spending your time in the UK, how much time in the UK, and also how much time in Spain. If your aim is to register for residency in Gibraltar, to take advantage of the tax advantages, but really you intend to live in Spain, that won't work. People may have done that in the past. People may be trying to stay under the radar now, but it's very unlikely that you will get away with that. So in Spain, there are two ways to kind of define if you're a tax resident in Spain. It's, do you spend more than 183 days there? The second test is the center of your economic and vital interests in Spain. So what they mean by that is for example, say you rent a studio flat in Gibraltar, but you spend most of your week there, maybe the weekends in Spain. But in Spain, you have your large 4-bed villa in Sota Grande, Marbella. Maybe your children go to school there. Maybe your spouse lives there. If that's the case, even if you're just spending the weekends in Spain, they would view that the center of your economic and vital interest is in Spain, and therefore you would be a tax resident in Spain, and you would have to pay tax on your worldwide income in Spain. So be mindful of that. Also be mindful of the time that you spend in the UK. A lot of people think, well, I have residency in Gibraltar now, so I won't be tax resident in the UK. That's not necessarily true. In the UK, they have something called the UK Statutory Residency Test. And that dictates, if you've left the UK, how many days you can spend in the UK without re-triggering UK tax residency. And the last thing you want to do is establish your residency in Gibraltar on the basis that you're going to pay a lot less tax in Gibraltar, but then re-trigger UK tax residency. So the amount of days that you can spend in the UK without re-triggering tax residency, based on a few different factors, and these are what they call your ties. The more ties you have to the UK, the less time you can spend there without triggering UK tax residency. So it's important to assess the UK statutory residency test. We can help you with that, or you can speak with your UK accountant. The next thing to consider is inheritance tax. And you may know that in Gibraltar, there is no inheritance tax. That's the good news. The not so good news is that you would remain exposed to UK inheritance tax. So again, another misconception is that we leave the UK, we don't pay our income tax there, therefore we won't pay UK inheritance tax when we pass away. And bear in mind, inheritance tax in the UK is based on the estate, not those who are benefiting from it, like happens in Spain. But in the UK, your inheritance tax is based on not your tax residency, but your domicile. So our domicile we tend to acquire at birth. based on where we were born, where our parents were born. And then you can acquire a domicile. So to use an example, if you were born in Spain, you moved to Spain when you were a child, a teenager, early 20s, but you spent 20, 30, 40 years in Spain, it's quite likely that you've acquired a UK domicile. Now, what you would like to do is when you leave the UK, you acquire a new domicile. So you leave the UK for Gibraltar and you acquire a Gibraltar domicile, and therefore you lose your UK domicile. Now, that is very difficult to do. Firstly, you have to be out of the UK for a minimum of 6 tax years. It used to be longer, but now it's 6. You also have to cut off all ties with the UK. And these have to be pretty much everything. They can be something very small. And you would need to demonstrate that Gibraltar is now your new home for life. So, if you left the UK, spent 5 years in Spain, then another 5 years in Portugal, then 5 years and then you move to Gibraltar, you spent 10, 11 years outside of the UK, so over the 6, but really you haven't established a new home. You've moved between these two places. So really when you move to Gibraltar, the clock starts again. And bear in mind, there is no official measurement of your domicile. You can't go to HMRC in the UK and say, look, I've done all this. Am I UK domicile? They would never say yes or no. They wouldn't do that. It's not in their interest. And also bear in mind that when it comes to inheritance tax, you are not there to defend yourself. Your estate will be there. Your estate may claim, okay, this individual is non-UK domicile, but HMRC might challenge that, which they have done in the past. And if you look at recent cases, they are usually successful and they can point to very small situations or ties which still link you to the UK. So our advice is to plan for the worst rather than hope for the best. And so as an expat, especially living in Gibraltar, there are a lot of planning opportunities that you can take advantage of to move your assets outside of UK inheritance tax. And there are options where you could move assets outside of the UK for UK inheritance tax, and they would remain outside even if you were to return to the UK in later years. So is that something that we can offer? Absolutely something we should discuss with your inheritance tax is a big issue. And it is likely to change coming up. We have, as I record this webinar, there is a talk about the next general election. If the Labour government come in, will they be stronger with inheritance tax? All we do know is inheritance tax receipts are going up every year. And that's a large source of revenue for the taxman. And you should do everything you can in a legitimate way to protect against that. So the other thing to consider is you move to Gibraltar, and there's a lot of tax planning opportunities here for you. There's no capital gains in Gibraltar. So if you can move your assets to Gibraltar, you have your investments, you're now living in Gibraltar, there's no capital gains. That's a great opportunity. Again, we compare it to the UK where there's a capital gains tax allowance, which is reducing. I think it's 6,000 now, just over 6,000. It's going to go down again to 3,000. So a great opportunity here. Another opportunity is with your UK pensions. Now, the tax treatment of your pensions in Gibraltar depends on a few factors, what type of pension it is, your age, factors like that. But if you can move your UK pension to a Gibraltar QROPS, which is a qualifying registered overseas pension scheme, income from a Gibraltar QROPS is taxed at just 2.5%. You can still take the 25% lump sum as a tax-free in Gibraltar. In fact, if you transferred your pension and you've been in Gibraltar for sufficient amount of time, that could increase to 30%, but let's just say 25%. So you still get that, but then the income payments after that are taxed at just 2.5%. which is incredible. Again, we compare it to the UK, where you will be taxed at 20, 40, 45, depending on how much you're taking. And the QOPS operates very similar to a UK pension. The assets are held within there. They continue to grow. There's no capital gains. The only tax you would pay is this 2.5% on the income. There's also historically another good reason to move your pension to a Gibraltar QOPS, and that's the lifetime allowance. So in the UK for pensions, we have the lifetime allowance, or we did have, which was reduced over time, and it was just over $1 million. It was 1,073,100. Now, very recently, the Conservative government decided to abolish the lifetime allowance. So there's no limit. The lifetime allowance is effectively a limit on the amount of pensions you can accumulate without paying additional taxes. So if you had above that 1,073,000, then you would pay additional taxes in a very simple form. The Conservative government have decided to abolish that. That's great. People can accumulate larger pensions. But what is likely is the lifetime allowance will be introduced again or reintroduced. We can see that happening. We don't know for certain, but again, the talk is if there's a Labour government, they will introduce that. So at the moment, there's a really good opportunity because again, we don't know at what level it will be introduced if it is. If you move your pension to a Gibraltar QOPS now, where there is no lifetime allowance, then effectively the transfer of that pension moves it outside of UK legislation. So if the lifetime allowance is reintroduced and you're above that, it's not an issue. You've already transferred it out. You won't have to pay that. That's if the lifetime allowance operates exactly as it did before it was abolished, which is quite likely. So looking at your pensions, reviewing your pension, that's a very important, as it is in reviewing all your investments or assets that you hold. You need to kind of consider the kind of taxation on those. Also, you may have UK property. Bear in mind that if you're in receipt of rental income from UK properties, you have to continue to pay that in the UK. You're a tax resident in Gibraltar, but because that property is physically situated in the UK, then you have to pay tax on that. You also might want to consider the sale of property in the UK. Again, in the UK, if we have our main residence, we sell that. If there's capital gains on that, we don't pay any tax on that because it's our main residence. You will on additional properties. But if you exit the UK and you've been out of the UK for X amount of time, then you may have to pay capital gains to the UK on that growth. So you have to consider if you're planning on selling your UK home, the timing of that. Likewise, if you're selling rental properties or a property portfolio, it might be best to sell these after you exit the UK, because if you've held them for some time before 2015, it might be more tax efficient to sell these as an expat, because you won't pay capital gains in Gibraltar, but you will in the UK, but it's structured differently. Again, there's a lot of kind of detail to go into with that, but it's just something that you need to consider. And this webinar is the key things to consider. And there's opportunities to structure that in the best way. What we always say to anyone who's seriously considering moving to Gibraltar to the UK is, or elsewhere for that matter, it's important to plan ahead of time. The earlier you plan, the better, because there are opportunities to take advantage of, but maybe once you've relocated, maybe it's too late for something. So plan in advance, build a relationship with an advisor here, such as Fiduciary Wealth, and we can guide you through that process. We can help you with your residency application, but we can also help you with the tax planning and management of your pensions and investments. So really, that's the end of the webinar. It's key thing to consider. For the picky if there's people watching these who want to be picky, there'll be things that I haven't included. These are what we define as the key things. and I haven't included all the detail. Today's webinar is a guide for those seriously considering moving to Gibraltar. If that is yourself, then reach out to us and we can have a chat and we can let you know exactly how we can help you with. We will consider the issues that you have, your individual situation, and help you put in a plan to make sure that your relocation is as smooth as possible, to make sure everything is set up as tax efficient as possible, and you can enjoy your new life in Gibraltar with that peace of mind. So if that is you, I'm going to bring up our contact details on the screen now. So you should be able to see that. So to remind you, it's Fiduciary Wealth Management. Our website is at fiduciarywealth.gi. You can contact us on inquiries with an E at fwm.gi, or give us a call on 00350 200 50982. I'm sure you want to investigate who you're dealing with and who you're talking to. So not only visit our website, feel free to go to our Trustpilot account, Fiduciary Wealth on Trustpilot, see independent reviews of who we are and what we do. And if you're not already on our YouTube channel watching this webinar, head to our YouTube. There's plenty more webinars, quite a few on relocating to Gibraltar. Some of them actually cover property in Gibraltar, which is something that you really want to consider. It's a fast-moving property market here, so you need to be sharp on that. But also we have client testimonials on that, so you have a flavor of, again, who we are, the service that we offer our clients, and how we help people in the past. So for now, I will say thank you for watching this webinar. For those interested in relocating to Gibraltar, feel free to reach out, and I will look forward to talking to some of you in the future. So thank you and have a lovely day. Goodbye.